has spent more than 25 years in prison, but because of a decision by former President Biden, he will be released this summer.
Adrian Peeler was granted clemency in Biden's final days in office, despite being responsible for killing a mother and son.
So there has been a ton of news that has broken related to pardons and commutations. You have the Trump pardons of the January 6th defendants, and of course, obviously, we have the pardons and commutations issued by Joe Biden that were equally, if not more so, controversial if you come at it from a right-leaning perspective. Of course, there was the Hunter Biden one, which was for 10 years. You also have the Biden family issued at the last minute, as well as Anthony Fauci and a bunch of other government officials that Biden gave blanket pardons to. Now, while that grabbed the headlines, while that grabbed the attention, it turns out that Joseph R. Biden, our commander-in-chief, also decided to commute the sentences of 2,500 allegedly non-violent drug offenders, people who are victimized by the system and our war on drugs, and included in that bunch, that bad bunch, if you will, is a man called Adrian Peeler. Now, if you're in the state of Connecticut, you are likely familiar with Adrian Peeler because this man's crime was so heinous, so horrific, so disgusting. That's the reason why your state has a witness protection program, and it turns out he was serving 35 years for drug-related charges because he's a drug kingpin, but he's also a child murderer, a double murderer, and a murderer of state's witnesses. But Biden is going to have him released, or because of his commutation, he will be released in July of this year. It's absolute madness from top to bottom, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The monster that is Adrian Peeler, and how absurd and disgusting it is that the ACLU, or whatever stupid-ass leftist organization, put him on the list of innocent Baba angels that were just victimized by our unfair and possibly evil, white, and racist criminal justice system. But before we get into that, I will remind you that on February 15th and February 16th is DebateCon. It is in Newark, New Jersey. I'm going to be there on the 16th, so the link to tickets is in the top of the description. If you're in and around the area, I would love to see you there.
Your reporter Dylan Fearon is here right now in the studio to break down the case, and of course the decision here, Dylan, that was pretty shocking to a lot of people.
So normally when people say a decision was shocking or something of the sort, and you end up looking into it, you find out that it's actually not that shocking. It's not that surprising. But this specific case is definitely the outlier in that it is absolutely shocking. It is absolutely horrifying. And of course, nobody at the ACLU, nobody at these left-wing organizations that wanted this guy out of prison even told the family that they were recommending that this person receive a commutation because he's an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin. And the reason why this guy was in federal custody is actually because he didn't get convicted of the two murders himself back in the state of Connecticut. He was able to beat those charges. However, he was convicted on the conspiracy to commit murder charges, so he got 25 years of state time in the state of Connecticut. And then when that sentence was over, he was then booted over to federal custody because he also had convictions for federal drug charges.
Let's first go back to the 1990s over in Bridgeport. Adrian Peeler was in his mid-20s, but already a notorious drug kingpin in the city. His brother was on trial for murder and ordered Adrian to kill two witnesses in the case, an 8-year-old boy and his mother. This is mother Karen Clark and her son Leroy Brown. People called him BJ. They were shot and killed in this Bridgeport house in 1999. BJ was set to be a key witness in the murder trial of Adrian Peeler's brother Russell. Prosecutors say Russell Peeler persuaded Adrian to execute Karen and BJ.
Now look, I'm sorry if the details of this case are going to be troubling for you guys out there in the audience, but it is very important for you to understand what this man actually did and why it's so disgusting and unforgivable that he was on a list of non-violent offenders and that he was released or is going to be released in the month of July. Because of course, on one side of this particular story, you have the victims, you have the mother and her son. And guess what? The son was one of the key witnesses in a murder case for Peeler's brother. He, at 8 years old, was going to testify to what he saw in that particular case and was trying to be brave enough to lock up a drug kingpin. Now, Leroy, or BJ as he was more popularly known, told the cops that he and another boy were sitting in Sneed's car when Russell shot and wounded Sneed in a 1997 drive-by, the outlet said. Sneed survived the attack but then was later killed. Now, to keep him from telling the story, Peeler allegedly ambushed the mom and the son as they came back to their Bridgeport apartment. Court documents said authorities found BJ face down at the top of the stairs while Clark was found shot to death in a nearby bedroom where she tried to call for help. So yeah, yeah, this kid and the mom decide that they're going to come forward to testify. It's the 1990s, crime is ridiculously high, and they're going after a drug kingpin. It's obviously a dangerous scenario. However, because the state of Connecticut didn't really have a witness protection program, in this particular instance, they were just living in their regular, ordinary Bridgeport apartment. But still, despite the fact that there were obvious threats, they were not deterred, but Adrian Peeler was not deterred by any aspect of humanity, so he decided to go into the home, ambush them, kill the mother, kill the kid, and leave them face down at the top of the stairs. And what makes this even worse, what makes this even more disgusting, is that the brother of the mother, aka the uncle of little Leroy, little BJ as he was known, actually said that his family members are going to be erased. They're going to be forgotten by society. And unfortunately, those words became reality because Joe Biden, completely forgetting about this guy's criminal history, ended up granting this person clemency and is just going to release him like it's no big deal. Again, they paint this individual as an innocent person who just got caught up with a little bit too much marijuana, and then the evil criminal justice system ended up targeting him, possibly due to evil white racism, even though, again, this guy has no regard for black people. He has no regard for anyone. He murdered an 8-year-old in his own home because he's a monster, pure and simple. And by the way, it is a blessing in this particular case that we had those drug charges because he already finished out his sentence for the homicide charges because they could only convict him on conspiracy with the homicide, not the actual murder.
Here's Karen's brother, Oswald Clark, more than 2 decades ago.
And they're going to feed this guy 3 meals a day in prison for the rest of his life, while Karen and BJ, everybody forgets them. Their memory's forgotten now.
Look, he's completely right. In some respects, these people were forgotten. The past crimes of Adrian Peeler were completely out of mind when he got this commutation for this drug conviction. But on the flip side, what they actually really did was erase them by rewriting the history of this individual. These organizations decided that this person was an apt candidate for having his sentence commuted because, you know, he's probably the victim of society. He's probably the victim of poverty. And you can't really hold him accountable for murdering a mother and her 8-year-old son because he grew up in hard times. I mean, sure, they were drug kingpins. Sure, they had plenty of money. Sure, his brother probably did commit the murder that he was a witness to, and that's the reason why BJ was testifying against him. But you know what? You can't hold them accountable. That's just the systemic systems. Evil white racism mentioned the crime bill 2 or 3 times because the sentence that he was really serving, it just was too long. It was just too unforgiving. I mean, all he did was murder 2 individuals and run a drug empire. Is it really sensible for him to get 25 years and then 35 years stacked on top of that? Nah, no way. Let's just let him out. Let him go. He's 48 years old. He has way more people to commit crimes against, and I guess he might be reformed or something or another. I mean, who the hell really cares? Maybe he'll go after the brother for being a sympathetic witness or character witness or somebody who gave a victim impact statement, because honestly, what business is it of him to talk about his relatives because the criminal takes priority?
The murders sent shockwaves through Connecticut. The state even started a witness protection program named after BJ. Adrian was charged with murder, acquitted, and then convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He was initially sentenced to 25 years in prison, along with a 35-year federal drug sentence. The sentence for the murders finished in 2022. Peeler was sent to a federal prison in West Virginia for the drug conviction, where he's sleeping tonight. But last week, President Biden granted clemency to nearly 2,500 people who he calls nonviolent drug offenders. Peeler is included in that group. Senator Richard Blumenthal today saying, "It seems to me that someone dropped the ball here to let this person get released. This was a really vicious murder that changed our laws. It also highlights how we need to take a look at the pardon system to see how it can be improved."
Now look, Richard Blumenthal, the senator from Connecticut, somebody who I'm not a fan of, is obviously outraged by this because, again, like they said in that segment, they quite literally named their witness protection program for Leroy, for little BJ, who was killed in this particular crime by this particular man, and he got a commutation.
President Biden is calling the record number of commutations, quote, an important step towards righting historic wrongs, correcting sentencing disparities, and providing deserving individuals the opportunity to return to their families and communities after spending far too much time behind bars.
I mean, again, just think about the quote from the brother, Oswald, that we heard earlier in the segment about how Karen and BJ would be forgotten.
And they're going to feed this guy 3 meals a day in prison for the rest of his life, while Karen and BJ, Everybody forgets them. Their memory's forgotten now.
And then you have Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States, less than 25 years after the conviction, saying, you know what? This guy, innocent Beba Angel, non-violent offender, again, a double murderer, a child murderer, being labeled a non-violent offender, therefore he is deserving of clemency. Therefore he is deserving of mercy. We're gonna let this guy back out on the streets because he deserves a second chance. Again, did he give little Leroy, did he give BJ a second chance? No, absolutely not. He left him face down in a pool of his own blood, shot him execution style like he was an animal, because his brother is also a no-good murderer, and this kid was ready to stand up to him.
President Biden is calling the record number of commutations, quote, an important step towards righting historic wrongs.
Again, it's an absolute joke. Joe Biden is selling these commutations that, again, included this double murderer, this child murderer, this guy whose crime was so heinous they actually created a whole witness protection program and named it for the victim in the state of Connecticut, righting a historical wrong, righting a historical injustice, dealing with sentencing disparities. Was I not giving you the hint that this was coming? Was I not telling you or tipping you off that we were going in this direction and this was the motivation? We are being told that Adrian Peeler, the child murderer, is the victim of society, is the victim of some kind of injustice, and is the victim of unfair treatment by law enforcement. This guy committed these murders, and they couldn't convict him of murder. They could only get him on conspiracy of murder, which is why he's not in state prison for the rest of his life. And by the way, this is the kind of person that should be facing the death penalty. But again, even though this guy won out in court on the higher charge, ended up getting just 25 years for double murder, a double murderer of a state witness, he was able to get this commutation, and we're supposed to believe that he was victimized and he was deserving and he has been reformed. Well, I don't buy it. Adrian Peeler is a monster. He should definitely be in prison for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, the Democratic Party, these left-wing organizations think differently. They think that we should arrest poverty. We should arrest society. What the real issue is that there were some sentencing disparities between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. By the way, this is likely due to the fact that crack cocaine had much more violence associated with it, kind of like child murder, the murder of a witness. This guy, by the way, also his brother murdered somebody else, so he's covering up for another murder. But let's just set all that aside, talk about evil white racism, give ourselves a pat on the back as we unleash this guy back into the community that desperately wants him there.
Former prosecutor and current defense attorney Ryan McGuigan remembers the case well and answers the one question many people in Connecticut have. Can the Biden decision be reversed if the Peeler case wasn't properly vetted?
And the answer is no. So the president of the United States has the power of clemency, and it's plenary, which means that it's not up for review by Congress. It's not up to review by a court. We have three separate branches of government. They're equal, and they are detached. And the other two cannot interfere with the president's power for clemency.
Now look, they bring in a prosecutor at the time who is turned into a defense attorney, and he makes it clear, which I could have told you, that there's nothing to be done about this. The president has absolute power in this regard. Once the decision is made, it cannot be undone. We all have to live with the consequences of that.
Now, Adrian Peeler will be released on July 16th. His brother Russell is serving a life sentence. The U.S. Attorney's Office was never consulted or notified in advance of the clemency announcement.
But you guys might be happy to hear that Russell Peeler, the guy who committed the other murder, is serving a life sentence, so he didn't get to escape consequences for his crime by ordering the murder of this 8-year-old, even though Adrian Peeler is going to be dumped back onto the streets. And by the way, we also find out that Biden didn't consult anybody in his own government to review these cases. He just went off a list provided to him by a left-wing organization that many people are saying is actually the ACLU, which, if true, is absolutely shameful. Honestly, this is some Innocence Project level nonsense, an absolute fraud on the American people, and now a brutal double murderer, again, child murderer, child executioner, has been dumped back onto the streets, courtesy of President Biden and left-wing criminal justice reform. But of course, those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. If you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been Talking About Madness from the Reformers. Once again, till next time.